Good morning. You're very welcome to the third of our series of webinars on the EUnite for Health Week. I'm delighted that so many of you are joining us. We will be kicking off properly in just a moment. But first of all, I'll give you a little reminder on what we have been talking about in our first and second seminars this week. On Monday, we kicked off with discussing about how Europe can collaborate better on healthcare, because we all do need to work together. That's one of the key messages that everyone is taking away from the COVID-19 pandemic. We also looked at how a healthy society is a wealthy society, and how we can transform the idea of spending money on healthcare from a cost to an investment. So that was a really key message that came out of Monday's webinar. On Tuesday, or Wednesday rather, Tuesday's webinar, that was Tuesday's webinar. Wednesday's webinar was yesterday. And in that we discussed data and digital, because that's going to get us to where we want to go. There was a lot of discussion about trust, about what we can do to bring people on board, and about how big data modeling really can help us do more in the future. Today, we are going to be talking about the innovation ecosystem. And this is all under the umbrella of this week's theme, which is leveraging the power of digital technology and innovation to build a sustainable healthcare system. Now, the EUnite for Health is being very in its nascent stage. It was put together, heralded by Novartis, but also supported by the Corporate Accelerator Forum, the European Cancer Patient Coalition, EFPIA, Europa Bio, InnoMed, Junior Achievement Europe, Scanbalt, and the Y4 Institute, and there will be other partners coming on, as this is a growing movement. Now today, what we're going to be discussing is, as I say, all about innovation. We have got some great speakers for you, so we do want to get you involved in asking the questions. At the bottom of your screen, there's a little Q&A button, so you can put the questions to the panelists in there. Please be concise, be clear. If it's to a specific panelist, do say so, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as is possible in just 1 hour. But of course, we know we can't answer everything in 1 hour, so do use the hashtag EUnite or EUNITE #4 Europe, Healthy Europe, and you can share the conversation, get your colleagues involved, and really get this trending. Now, with that, I am going to hand over to a Novartis representative who is the head of the region for Europe for Novartis Oncology, and that's Kees Rox. Kees, tell us a bit more about the movement and why we're all so excited about it this week.
So Jen, thank you. And thank you for summarizing what already happened this week, because talking about sustainability and the power of digital is very important with this EUnite initiative, where we try to create a movement where all stakeholders come together and really use their experience, knowledge, but also their networks, the way they work, the place they work, to come together and really change how we're looking at health in Europe, because we need to come together to conquer the challenges of the future. Today, after 3 days, this is the third day with 3 meetings, 3 topics. It is, as you said, all about innovation. And innovation actually is the ability to see change as an opportunity and not as a threat. A lot of people are reluctant to step into change, but innovation is really seeing that opportunity and do it together. And if you then specify that for health, in my definition, it is more than product development. Yes, I'm part of the Novartis community, but it is not only about product development. It's about services. It's about practices. It's about systems, like the HTA systems. And it's about policies. So also the policies which we see developing in Europe and in the member states are very important and need to stay in sync with what innovation can bring. And only if we stay in sync and all work together hand in hand, then we can make the progress we would like to make and save many more lives. And not only in cancer care, where my area of responsibility is, but all other diseases as well. And I'm super pleased with the initiatives at the European level, the European Commission with the Beating Cancer Plan, the Cancer Mission, but also the EU Pharmaceutical Strategy. There is a growing consensus that policies need to be rethought, and they should stimulate innovation. So that is where our thinking all come together. So it's not that we are working in silos. Of course, that is still an issue we need to tackle, but more and more we are aligned on what needs to happen to really make this work for everybody, but mainly for the patients and the citizens in Europe. And innovation should be rewarded, and we need to protect innovation because we need that to continue to move forward. And we have a challenge there also to stay competitive as Europe, because that's what we all want as well, because that is also helping the economy and the wealth you talked about, not only personal, but also as nations within Europe. And in April, when we had another EUnite meeting, the former Minister of Health, Mary Harney, and I met her in another panel earlier this week, and she's very outspoken, she's very clear in what she says, and she highlighted back then in April that out of the 50 top research universities, the top 50, 16 are in Europe. But if you then look at the output, only 16% of the life science patents come from those universities. So there's still a long way to go that we make Europe, the leading area, the leading part in the world on innovation. So we need to conclude that innovation is needed for the healthcare ecosystems. And it touches everything, as I said before. And yesterday, Diana Joseph said that innovation is not a backup plan. It's an insurance plan. So that's in line with what I said before, right? We need all to work together to drive that innovation. And as we also heard yesterday, is that data will be crucial. And there I'm still struggling when I talk with all the partners around the table. There is reluctance to step into that data privacy. Now, I've been talking with patients and I've been talking with citizens. If you talk with patients, they have no reservations whatsoever. If you talk with citizens, they're worried, they're scared, data privacy, what is happening with my data? And therefore, we also see reluctance at the level of politicians. And we all need to be clear on what we want to achieve with those data. And we discussed that yesterday, and we have seen the value and the need to work on that. So we need to work together. We need to have that story, and part of education of our citizens, but also our politicians need to open up more for that. We need to break down those silos as well in how we work together. And yes, we look a lot at the European Commission because we believe that they need to lead more within Europe. And we've seen during the crisis as well that it can be done. We could unite the member states by leading from the center. And that is what's needed going forward as well, that we're more united, that we do more things the same way and we go forward. But for that, we need to break down the silos at country and at European level. So with that, Europe can start to lead in the health sector, but for that, we need all stakeholders all together. So that's the industry, which I represent. Of course, we need to continue to innovate, to bring safe and very effective solutions to the patients and continue to save more lives than we've ever done before. We need the EU institutions to foster the dialogue, to look at the policies, to look at the systems. And of course, as I just said, it's a European one and it's a country one. So we also need the national governments. And we've seen, and I'm going to repeat myself, that COVID was a great example. It can be done. We can pull all the same string, moving in the same direction. And it should not start and end with COVID. COVID should be a great learning that we know how to do it. And then the patients organizations and the NGOs, they need to let us know what is working, what's not working, where are still the unmet needs. And they need to support us to improve the functionality of the ecosystem. And I would like to close saying that change calls for innovation. Innovation leads to progress. And that is what patients, citizens, and our society are waiting for. And we need to take the lead, all stakeholders together. And I would like to quote EU Commissioner Maria Gabriel. She said, Europe has to strengthen the relationship between education, health, and innovation. She also endorsed innovation ecosystems, which integrate the knowledge triangle of business, education, and research. We want this ecosystem to be long-lasting. We want to build something sustainable. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today, the third day of 3 amazing opportunities to create a movement like EUnite and really do the right thing for our patients, our citizens, and save more lives than ever before. So I would like to thank all the panelists for joining today and you, Jen, for moderating it. So with that, back to you, Jen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm interested in really quoting Maria Gabriel because she has some great comments. Last week she was saying, we all talk about building back better. She says we should build forward better. So I'm sure that's something to bear in mind for our discussion today. And I can invite the panelists now to switch on their cameras because we do have joining us from the European Commission. We have Carmen Laplaza Santos, who's head of the Health, Innovation and Ecosystems Unit. We also have from the European Parliament MEP Ivars Ijabs, who is the Vice Chair of the Beating Cancer Committee and also on the ITRE Committee, which is the Industry and Research and Energy Committee in the European Parliament. We have Janos Pikani, who is the Chairman of Scanbalt. We have Rebecca Günther, Head of Europe Santos. Milena Stojceva is leading the Junior Achievement Pre-Accelerator Hub program, and Claire Scantleberry is Secretary General at Europa Bio. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. We have a lot to talk about this morning, so I'm going to hand over the floor straight away, Carmen, to you and ask, how is the Commission embodying this new paradigm shift towards these innovation ecosystems? What can we expect for the future of health and R&D? Carmen, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Jennifer. So, well, actually, this question is very important to us and it's already in our minds since a while, and even before the COVID crisis emerged. We absolutely want to do a research that has an impact. I think that Horizon Europe is main feature is the impact, searching for impact. We want to do a research that has a benefit to the society, that has an impact into the society. And for that, we have launched a deep reflection in order to see how better we can do research. As it was said before, Europe is very good in doing science, breakthrough science, excellent science. We have incredible researchers and innovators behind us, but we are not that good in translating this science into the market. And that's one of the main aspects that Horizon Europe wants to do a push for. So how will we, there are different examples in which we see how we are going to try to be successful in this road. And one thing can be in how we will support innovation. We will support further innovators when they are close to the market. An example is the creation of the European Innovation Council. But more importantly, we will be differently doing our, for example, the working of our, the writing of our work programs. We are going to look for a research that is more involving the different stakeholders that are key in order to bring the results to the society. So for example, we will encourage, and we are encouraging proposers to look really at how regulators, how healthcare professionals, how patients need to be involved from early stages of the research and innovation process in order to win time, but also in order to help them develop a research that it's needed, that it's answering to the specific needs of those stakeholders. We are doing also a change by the way we are collaborating inside the Commission. We are really doing our most to break the silos, to really ensure that the results coming from research will also be influential in policy making, and at the time, and also at the same time that wherever are questions important for the different sectorial policies will be answered or will be important in the topics that we will be funding. So there has been an extensive co-creation across the different DGs of the Commission in order to materialize this. We are also, we have seen how collaboration has been essential in the tackling of the COVID crisis, and we are extensively collaborating and pushing collaboration in a cross-sectorial way in the different instruments we have at our disposal to push for innovation in healthcare. For example, following the success of our joint undertaking with the pharmaceutical industry, IMI, we are working on a new joint undertaking in the context of the NACE framework, financial framework, IHI, the Innovative Health Initiative, where we have extended the sectors with whom we will work. We will work not only with the pharmaceutical industry, but also with different sectors of the health industry representatives in order to materialize this integration of different technologies that is essential in our eyes to tackle the challenges. We are also collaborate strongly with in the context of the preparation of this joint undertaking in order to ensure that as I said, the stakeholders that are involved in bringing the innovation to the market will be much more involved in the thinking, in the strategic decisions around what to support. Also, we are collaborating very strongly with member states. In particular, we are building different co-funds, one on the transformation of healthcare systems, where innovation ecosystems will be an important part. Just to say that we will continue, we have realized how much it's important this dialogue as a regular dialogue between the demand and the supply to ensure for uptake. So we will continue supporting innovation procurement as a way to embed innovation in healthcare. I think I will stop here, but we'll be happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. I'm sure we usually do have questions for the Commission. Reminder to our participants, you can put questions using that Q&A function below. Let us turn now to the other institution. Ivars, give us your opening thoughts, please.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, well, I think that everyone would agree, actually, that basically this COVID crisis should serve rather as an impulse for new initiatives in common healthcare, common health innovation initiatives in Europe. But as for the BECA committee, the committee of the European Parliament dealing with the beating cancer issues, I think that, well, we have included in our draft report right now quite a few things that, well, would support and should support a common approach to the innovation in therapeutical and diagnostic issues. First of all, well, what we are trying to support is what was said, breaking silos and having a common, what we call holistic approach to innovation, which wouldn't include, just like Mr. Rock said, not just the product development, but just more social issues, as we call it, from a bench to the bedside. And in that sense, I think that what is crucial, of course, is to develop the existing initiatives like the Horizon Europe Cancer Mission to fight for European reference networks being developed all across Europe and being used, a common approach to clinical trials, and of course also research and innovation. And that's why we call not just for the European institutions themselves and for the European budget, which has been increased substantially with the EU for Health and so on and so forth, but also to the member states to increase their funding for at least 20% of mobilization on therapeutic and diagnostic cancer innovations, which I think would be a good basis to move forward with our common European approach, because as we all know, just as was said by the previous speaker, Europe is lagging behind on many issues, as for not in science and research itself, but how do we implement those scientific research findings in new technologies, in new pharmaceuticals, in new initiatives to include this holistic approach. Data is a huge question everywhere. I know that there has been a webinar on that issue before, because of course, if we really want to have a united system in Europe in dealing with genomic data, with treatment data, and so on and so forth, with imaging data, which is an important issue, and of course, the very issue of data protection is quite crucial. But nevertheless, I think that the European Union has a lot of positive experience in dealing with this question, so we will solve that. But let me end with a statement that, well, yeah, we see right now in the European Parliament very clearly, especially in the Becker committee, that in the health sector, more Europe, more coordinated action is needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avaris. And you mentioned there a holistic approach, and breaking down silos was something that we've talked about in the last 2 days as well. So Janis, let me come to you. Your network brings together a range of different stakeholders. So from your perspective, what are the main challenges and opportunities across Europe, be that from different regions or in different areas?
Thank you, Jennifer. Actually, Scanbalt was created 20 years ago because the players, clusters in the field felt that there is a need for collaboration and coordination. And this has been so for the last 20 years in different maybe problems that we have to face. But the first step, what we as a clusters method that we bring together, like from bottom up initiative to collaborate, to discuss, and to bring to the governments these issues that can actually take the innovation forward. Because already then we have seen how different is the situation in different member states, and also what has been the obstacles to bring the excellent academic science to the actually industry and to the bedside, as we can say. So last year's our emphasis has been to data, because data is the new oil, as has been said, and that's why without data it will be very difficult to reach any meaningful results. And that's why we have last year made initiative to bring together not only the Scanbalt region. Scanbalt is a meta cluster organization around Baltic Sea, but we have been bringing together clusters around Europe to give the cluster's opinion from the point of view of the European common data space. And we see it utmost importance that this can give us the new avenue to get actually to the global scenery with our excellent healthcare systems. Because if we look to the European healthcare system, then it can be said that these are leading in Europe. But the only thing what we need is to say the standardized information that can be exchanged cross borders and can bring us a new value, not only the primary use, but more importantly, secondary use of data for research, innovation, and to bring new products to the market. So this has been our goal now, with working with European presidencies, starting from the German presidency last year, now working through Portuguese, and we are planning to continue with Slovenian presidency next 6 months.
Thank you very much. Yes, interesting to hear how long you've been working on this. This is not a new issue, but it possibly feels more urgent because of the recent pandemic, or indeed ongoing, since we're still doing this via Zoom. Rebecca, let me turn to you to move the conversation on a little bit, talking about innovation and the healthcare ecosystem. So where would you position the off-patent innovation industry on the map? What is the issues when there is a loss of exclusivity? Because we're talking about getting Europe up to speed in innovation here.
Yeah, sure. So very quickly, let me first congratulate Kees and the entire team for bringing us together. I think it's a fantastic initiative. And more to say, it's so important that we all work together. So the solution is in working together and not in silos. And this is also true for the off-patent industry, which I represent. So the question is, what do we have in common, right? What is the off-patent industry and the innovation bringing together? And maybe to start with the obvious one, we're all part of exactly the same healthcare ecosystem. And the off-patent industry, of course, supplies roughly 70% of medicines into Europe. This said, and to have a short answer, you know what, our business model hugely relies really on innovation, which comes to the market. And I think our job is then to provide savings, which can make room for new innovation. So it's almost like a perfect cycle, and there is a lot of interdependencies. And what I'm also seeing working in Europe, we're seeing some paradox in modern healthcare. So on one side, we have this fantastic innovation coming to markets. And if I think about biologic, they really have revolutionized the way we treat disabling and life-threatening diseases. On the other side, we're still facing a lot of challenge to get access to those. So patients getting delayed access or no access, still in many markets in Europe. Because it is very obvious, right? The healthcare system are facing steadily cost pressure. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic is not going to most probably improve the situation. So there's a risk that we're jeopardizing access, sustainability, and of course, equity to modern healthcare. So addressing those challenges, and that's where I come in with the off-patent industry, needs a broad range of solutions. And I think we are playing a very important role. And personally, I believe we're part of the solution. So going back to the biologic example I just brought in, Sandoz 15 years ago launched the first biosimilar in Europe. And it was only possible, and I'm coming back to the collaboration piece, because of a strong collaboration with European Medicines Agency, where there was a lot of pioneering, really leading the regulatory pathway and bringing the first biosimilar to the market. And 15 years later, what you can see, we see 60 biosimilars on the market, 2 billion patient days of experience. And I think we could show that it is really a proven cost-effective alternative for patients and adding value. So the impact of the off-patent industry, and in this case, biosimilar, is quite big, because if you think about patient access, I think enabling broader and earlier access is of great value. And we have seen, if I take the example in Germany, we know that patients with rheumatoid arthritis in Bavaria, for example, they had to wait years to get access to biologic treatment, which is a disabling disease, right? And with the entry of biosimilars, this has been reduced to a couple of months, which is very good news for the patients. Also on the healthcare sustainability of the system, right? So the savings generated with biosimilars, and we talk a couple of billions, for example, in Spain, they can be refocused and reallocated to new innovation. But of course, now it's key that it's also used for new innovation and broader access, and that it is really refocused on the right measures. And last but not least, we sometimes forget. So the biggest, and I would say most powerful trigger of innovation is, by the way, competition. And competition is not just bringing new molecules to market, but I think where we play also an important role is on life cycle management. If you think about new galenic formulation, optimized treatment options, but also, of course, product features and services, because Kees was mentioning that we also need to think about patient services. And I think the competition drives us to go for more differentiated models. And I think that's, again, a huge value. So in a nutshell, I personally believe that the off-patent industry is part of the solution. And sometimes it's not so visible, but we really drive innovation because of savings and competition.
Well, I want to bring Milena in there because I know she has some hands-on experience when it comes to new companies, startups, and entrepreneurship. Give us your reaction to that, Milena. What are your thoughts and what have you been working on?
Thank you, Jen. And I also wanted to thank Novartis for organizing this EUnite week, because I see that the right time has come for us to collaborate on innovation. But I also want to take you one step further from what Kees said and also Janusz said. Innovation requires collaboration. I will say innovation requires co-creation. So it's not only about nowadays creating new products and services and working ourselves on developing those new opportunities, but I think for nowadays innovation is more equal to working together jointly to co-create these solutions that the complex environment requires. And we have been following, this has been our philosophy in creating a pre-accelerator movement, and also in setting up the path or the track for students or also researchers, young researchers, to move from their educational opportunities and learning to real commercialization of their research and products, following the open innovation model, which means that we are really putting on the market solutions that are demanded by the patients and by the society and the citizens. So it's no longer the push model of where we create products and put them on the market. It's a result of what really the society, the economy, and the market needs. And here I wanted to quote again Commissioner Gabriel, because we had an event in December last year jointly with Novartis on the opportunities for creating new pathways for innovation to reach the market and to be really putting Europe in a competitive role. And she said that our innovation ecosystem in Europe cannot afford these silos that we've been talking about. It needs support, it needs more access to funding, and the link from education to the market. So this is what we have started to do. We have built Pre-Accelerator that brings together students and researchers from different fields, domains, but with the focus to come up with solutions for healthcare, because healthcare nowadays is really becoming a bigger sector of the economy, and it can provide an opportunity for everyone to add value to both the economy and also to our individual businesses and communities. So looking forward to continue that pathway. We are very strong believers in education and entrepreneurial mindset at JA Europe. And we are looking forward to working jointly with the industry partners, also with the researchers, with some of the latest advancements in technology to translate these policies for innovation into reality.
Thank you, Milena. And Claire, you've heard all the other speakers before I come to you, so I guess that puts you in a beneficial position that you can react to everything that you've heard so far. What are the potential benefits for Europe if we get all of this right? Where are the pitfalls, and is there anything you've heard so far that makes you excited or concerned? Give me your thoughts.
No, thank you very much indeed. And obviously I sit in the exceptionally excellent position that I can just draw upon all of the previous speakers, which of course I all agree with. But I really want to build on what Keith said at the beginning. This is an opportunity. And so as more things become scientifically capable, and obviously COVID has accelerated a huge amount how we enable science, but we should be looking at building on this as much as possible. We've spoken about silos quite a lot already in this, and it's not just siloed by sector or siloed by country, it's also siloed at the phase of development. And we've already said that Europe turns out lots of publications. It has a lot of small company startups, but of course, innovation, it needs to impact all the way through the value chain of life sciences. So it's not just about turning out more small companies. It's about ensuring that we scale up massively infrastructure, our skills development, clinical maturation, the regulatory framework around this. We need to scale up the whole chain at the same time. And so innovation is not just early stage technology advance, it's the whole environmental advance. And this takes time. It doesn't just happen by putting more energy early in the pipeline. And I think Europe has demonstrated over and over again that just having great numbers at the beginning does not necessarily mean you have great numbers at the end of the process. And the benefits of this are huge. Obviously, you have clinical benefit. And this is why we sit here today. We're talking about patient benefit. And we already heard about, accelerated access to therapeutics through generics development. So the faster you can get things to patients, the more patients you can get it to, the more patients you can get it to without having to travel really far. These are all amazing positives. And by Europe investing in a very strategic way in our infrastructure development, in our skills development, this is banking capability. We saw the response to COVID in the vaccine manufacture. It required existing capability and infrastructure to be able to turn over rapidly towards vaccine manufacture. And that capability was there for it to be used. So we need to certainly make sure that we have more mature infrastructure, more widely networked skills. And this is a real strength of Europe, because it's not just, it's a generational shift that we can make as the new technologies become available to us. And Europe doesn't have the luxury of deciding whether it does or does not do this, or whether it does it quickly or whether it does it slowly. It has to do it quickly, and it has to do it right now, because the rest of the world is doing this. This is not a decision that we take in an isolated way. So if we want to remain competitive and grow and have these benefits for our own citizens, linked within the healthcare sector, Europe has to do this. And the great advantage with the new technologies coming out as well, particularly around the digital side, is that you can reflect and amplify the strengths of all countries in Europe. We've seen really amazing countries like Lithuania, Estonia, Bulgaria coming forward on really strong digital platforms. Whereas 25, 30 years ago, when you had the first sort of explosion of biotech small companies, this was very much large scale, wet lab, expensive, hard to do kind of stuff. Now, and that's why you see it focused in many of the larger companies within Europe. Now, all countries in Europe can play a really major role in delivering a very combined healthcare infrastructure and ecosystem, which is really amazing. And COVID has given us many things, obviously many terrible things, but look at the level of awareness in society in general about the role that healthcare plays and the infrastructure of healthcare required to do it. I mean, I have never in my life heard people talking about what brand of vaccine they got, where it's being manufactured, who's importing and exporting what. We need to build on this level of awareness so that people can champion what they see happening in their countries and reflect the fact that Europe as a whole is in a very good position to do this in a very structured and united way.
Thank you, Claire. A question here from one of our attendees, Elaine Quickshanks. Thank you, Elaine, for your question. I know you've been here all week asking interesting questions. Elaine has pointed out that, according to The Economist, Europe lags behind the US and Asia Pacific areas, and that she identifies one of the challenges is that there isn't enough assistance for scaling up, as you mentioned, Claire, and that there's often a simply selling on innovative biotechs to US companies. And I think we see that in other sectors, not just in healthcare. So I'd like you to address that, and I will link that together with perhaps a question about funding, which is the difference between EU funding or venture capital funding. What's the difference, and how can we empower entrepreneurs better? Because I'm trying to draw, I feel like, a contrast maybe with different parts of the world and how they do that. Milena, I'd like your reaction to that, and then Claire perhaps build on it, and then I'll come to Carmen. So Milena first there, your thoughts on any of those issues?
Well, I am noticing exactly the points that we were discussing that were made now with this question, that there is an opportunity really for Europe to excel because it has enough power, and with the leading universities and research institutions, we are creating solutions. But this is exactly where we have the lacking part. And this is why I brought up this comment that we need VCs and we need funding from Europe that invests in such new solutions, in startups or in SMEs that are making these contributions to innovation, but they do not have the capacity to compete on a global market, because we are on a global market. So we need a better coordination of the funding and also of the awareness about this need on EU level. And also maybe we need bigger trust. Europe in general is a little bit more risk averse than the US. I myself have been educated also in the US, and I can see immediately the difference in the attitude in how US funders approach new solutions, and they're really betting on the innovations much more than we are at Europe, where we're looking for more safe solutions and bets. And this is, I think, one of the really missing links, but I see an opportunity because, like I mentioned, we are collaborating with companies like Novartis, who are looking at ways of diversifying their portfolio and working jointly with the startups and new companies.
Thank you, Milena. Carmen, what sort of a role can the European Commission play in this, whether that be marshalling funding or looking at direct instruments like Horizon Europe?
Well, I think obviously funding is key, but not only funding for the sake of funding. From our side, as I told you, we are in a kind of also transformation in the way we are approaching our funding programs as well, and we are doing a lot to ensure or to accelerate the synergies between the different funding programs. Because obviously there are, I mean, in the different phases of innovation, there are things that are appropriate for a research and innovation program to fund, but not others. When we look closer to deployment, there are other funds that can intervene in a more appropriate way. So the synergy between the different funding programs is something that will be intensified, and that's why the co-creation and between the different DGs will help. But I think that we also have to look at how to incentivize the demand side. I mean, we need to ensure that we have a kind of pulling from those who ultimately will acquire those products or services or innovations, because otherwise, I mean, all the efforts will be completely vain. I was mentioning before innovation procurement as an instrument, and this is something that we think that must absolutely need to be pushed forward. We see again in a recent study that we conducted that Europe is lagging behind in the use of innovation procurement instrument as compared to other regions of the world. In the concrete case of healthcare, unless you incentivize the public procurement, you are losing most of the customers, because more than 70% of the average of procurement in healthcare is public. So we absolutely need to incentivize the dialogue between the public procurers and the industry, the public procurers and the innovators. And we are doing a lot of actions now precisely in order to not only incentivize the use of pre-commercial procurement, public procurement of innovation, from a European perspective, but from a European perspective, we are obviously funding this kind of instruments, but also at local level. We have seen companies that are in the process of becoming unicorns just because they develop this kind of pre-commercial procurement at local level in order to incentivize the dialogue between demand and supply. It has been key for many innovators to have this possibility to closely interact with those who need the product in order to match quicker get to the market. And obviously, this is also a way to diminish the risk, because there is clearly a sort of risk aversion in healthcare, but we need to fight against that. And these kind of instruments can help support procurers in order to also diminish this risk and really push forward the adoption of innovation. So I think there are many ways to look at these different questions. And from the Commission side, we are certainly doing it, but of course we will need interaction and help from all the different stakeholders, like the ones that are here together with us in this panel.
Absolutely. Claire, let me bring you back in again already, because you were touching on this issue of difficulty with scale up. Carmen mentioned there the procurement, public procurement in Europe, as well as the different funding models that we were talking about earlier. This very much is different to what we see in other parts of the world, in particular the US.
Absolutely. I really agree with Carmen on this, because a lot of the bottlenecks, Europe is very good at pushing technology forward, but it spends a lot of energy pushing it forward, when in fact you also need to address the demand, the pull side of it. If you can address the pull, you will get more investment. And one of the key things here is around the regulatory frameworks and the market access. Because if you can't point to an investor, whether you're a small company or a large company, and say, we will be able to sell into this market at this scale, why would they give you the money to do this thing? So I think Europe really needs to look at how it enables market access to build investment confidence. And it's not because the investment money is missing. We see it in all areas in the world. It's because it's not so attractive to put it where you can't see a clear route to getting return on your investment. And so we look at that. But what I want to see as well is Europe's focus on not short-term national-based programs, but large-scale, long-term strategic infrastructure development that is connected up between countries. And this is absolutely the strength of Europe. It can do this, and it can do it across borders, both to build the infrastructure and to enable the patients to travel and make use of the products that come out of this infrastructure. So we should play to our strengths here. We can't replicate probably the speed of some other areas in the world, but we can really harness the ability to cross borders within Europe and do things on a very large scale.
Thank you. So let me get you in and your comments on this as well. You're hearing a lot about the push and the pull in terms of creating innovative healthcare solutions. Is this the right approach? Is funding the correct approach? Do we need to lower some barriers to entry? What's your overall take on what we've been discussing so far?
Well, thank you for that question. First of all, the issue of funding and our comparison with the US is very telling of all those Europe being risk averse, Europe having a slightly different perception of what the public funding actually means and in what way should it be used, and so on and so forth. I'm more or less aware that the European Commission has a lot of experience with dealing with this issue, because, well, if we look at the Horizon program, of course, it is to some extent very classical of how those framework programs have been working, but nevertheless there are significant movement towards, let's say, more competitive, more innovative, more market-oriented approaches with the European Innovation Council, with a Pathfinder and Accelerator, and so on and so forth. And the same applies also, of course, to the innovation procurement as an issue which was mentioned before. But at the same time, if you ask me about what Europe should do in this particular context, we shouldn't forget that, well, if we are comparing ourselves with the US is a more or less homogeneous state, which is, well, has developed, let's say, a non-system of science and a non-system of higher education, which works perfectly in many ways. But Europe is still 27 different member states, 27 different innovation and research systems. And in that sense, I think that one of the main tasks of the European institutions is to bring out the potential which is everywhere in Europe, and not having that concentration, which sometimes has been quite widespread, let's say, in the European Union, when the most of the innovative enterprises, universities, research institutes, and so on and so forth are very much concentrated in the western part of the European Union, which means that, of course, there is a lot of excellence there. No doubt about that, but the potential of smart people, potential of people who are willing to invest themselves very much in innovation and creating those market creating innovations is everywhere. And of course, the European approach is very much excellence based, which is justified. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget that the potential for innovation is everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivars. Jānis, Ivars mentioned there about the achievements of the US system, if you like, but it's not always delivering necessarily for patients in healthcare terms. We have a very different approach in Europe. I'm sure that we like to see people taken care of. So give me what you think might be the different perspectives, the different lessons learned based on what you've been hearing.
Yeah, if we look to US and comparison to Europe, then we all know that there is a very strong controversy in this issue. If we look to the public health indicators in US, they are not beating European numbers, because the European average health of citizens is much better. So if we look how much US is spending on healthcare, then we see that this is close to 20%, it's 18 plus from GDP. If we look to the average spending in Europe, it's 9.9% from GDP. Of course, although that's maybe 25% in US spending goes to the lawyers, it's still quite substantial amount. And the other part is that what I want to come back to this public procurement issue. In Europe, the most of the healthcare spending comes through public procurement, which means that to get to the market with innovative products is very difficult, because you don't have history. You don't have, usually in public procurement, you need to demonstrate that you have already been able to provide services or products in historical. But if you have innovative products, how you can do this? And unfortunately, investors are looking to magical indicator like MRR, which is a monthly recurrent return. And if you don't have this, you are not able to raise money like from until if you don't have 100,000 euros per month, then you are not considered to be eligible for a Series A or Round A financing. This is like a chicken and egg problem. So that's why I totally agree that, and we have been talking actually this also in Scanbalt and with authorities for years, that one obstacle is public procurement. But we understand that if you spend public money, it has to be a very controlled way. And now this is the biggest question for us, is how to solve this controversy, how to find a good way and bring the new product to the market, because we see that we have, if you look to the academic merits and academic scale, then Europe has excellent science. And we have number of SMEs, but they don't get enough funding to grow to the multinationals. Thank you.
Thank you, Jānis. Well, maybe there are some lessons to be learned from the COVID-19 pandemic in this area. Things like the European Medicines Agency stepping up speed of approval and so on, that maybe led to some speedier innovation to market. Rebecca, you're going to get the final word because we are running out of time and I need to hand back to Kees for his wrap up. You mentioned, I think, earlier in your opening statement that biosimilars were a success story for Europe. Can you give us what are the lessons learned for the future that we should take from any of the success stories that you see?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the lessons learned is, of course, we need a sustainable market environment. I heard procurement a couple of times now in the discussion, and this is also true for biosimilars. We need to go away from this price only, winner takes it all tenders, because we see that this is really driving offshoring. And what is important for Europe, we need to keep the investments and manufacturing strengths in Europe, because Europe was once the pharmacy of the world. And I think we need to be very cautious to keep capacities, but also capabilities in Europe. And the other one is what you just said, regulatory pathway. We saw much more risk taking during COVID, and I think this is a learning we should take into the future, taking a bit more risk and leaning forward to drive innovation and get access for patients.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That's a positive note to end on. Thank you so much. I'm going to now invite Kees back to give us your thoughts, Kees, on what you've heard today, what has encouraged you indeed over the last 3 days. I know it's time goes so fast, even though we've had 3 hours over the last 3 days. I still feel like we've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, I totally agree, Jen. And yes, it's a richdom of insights, of comments which were made, opinions which were shared among all the panelists over 3 days. I think I could reflect on that for an hour or more, but we don't have that. We only have a few minutes. So first of all, thanks again to the panelists for joining and be as candid as you were and filling in for each other and really make this story real. And again, 3rd day out of 3. So if we look back over those 3 days, we really addressed the key topics, the key issues, and where we can sit at the same table and really work for solutions, really with all the stakeholders, including the European Commission, but also then what does it mean for the member states, and addressing what I said in my intro as well, getting those silos down. What encouraged me here as well is today is the spirit and the energy to be competitive, right? Lagging behind the US, which we discussed today. I think there were learnings. Is it the education system? Is it the fragmentation of Europe? And if yes, what can we do through the European Commission to overcome that and really be united? But because we see that we talk a lot about inequalities, and I was in another panel in another forum yesterday talking about inequalities, and a lot of people are focusing on inequalities within their country, but we see inequalities across Europe. And triggered by your comments today, you know, there is an inequality emerging between different parts of the world, Europe versus the US. And why should patients not benefit from the same innovations, the same services, the same benefits to extend, improve, and save their lives? So I think that we need to keep this discussion going. I'm super encouraged to do that. You have my commitment and the company behind it, but also to our partners. Let's stick together and make this work. I love the EUnite movement. I think something is boiling there. Based on all the enthusiasm and energy I've seen, I've felt, and also on the social media already. So let's continue this dialogue and make it happen together for our patients, for our citizens, and our societies. They deserve it, and we can make it happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kees. And I think we have coming up as well a hackathon. Did you want to mention some of the projects and innovation that we're going to see from the EUnite?
Nothing specific. I'm a big fan of hackathons. I've seen miracles happening in only 48 hours, where normally you take months and sometimes years to put something together. So with that, I'm just sharing my curiosity, and I'm looking forward to see the outcome. And then the pull through, because just coming up with potential solutions is not a solution in itself. So execution is key there. So let's see that. But I'm super excited. I've seen miracles happening in a very short time. So let's go for that.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you to all the attendees for your interest all week long. Please do keep sharing this on social media. Use the hashtag EUnite or EUnite for Healthy Europe, and we will keep this conversation going. Thank you for all your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. And thank you so much to all our great speakers for your insight. You've made it really fascinating morning. Thank you very much. Have a great day.